it's a dashboard light that says, hey, I need to go connect. I need to connect with myself. I need to connect with another human. What do I enjoy doing that's not related to work or performing?
All right. So, welcome to the You Are Lawyer podcast, Olivia Ash.
Thank you.
So, I love this artwork behind you. We got to jump right in. If you guys are watching on YouTube, artwork amazing.
Thank you. So this is one of my pieces. This is this year I painted this one. It was exhibited in gallery, and so I love abstract artwork. I love Jackson Pollock and other abstract artists, and I love the process of painting because it's incredibly therapeutic. So this was an experiment in playing. It's called play, and I tossed paint. I smudged with my hands. I squirted it. I scraped it. It was a lot of fun.
I love that. I mean, so how did you get started painting?
Well, I have been painting with a purpose since 2016. And before that, though, I have been painting and creating as a child and as a young woman, but I put that aside for academics and performance, sports and academics. And in 2016, I was looking at a summer of surgeries, July, August, and September. And so I had a lot of downtime. And one day I just said, I really want to paint large canvases. And it wasn't like start small, it was paint large. And I've been painting and showing when I can, when my time permits since.
I love that. I believe that lawyers are very creative. I think that the way that we put case law together, the way that we can listen to a client's story and then like sell it in a courtroom, I think all of that is creativity. But also, yes. I went to a creative arts elementary school. So I grew up like creating clay birds and giving up to my parents and stuff. So I thought it was just me for a long time. And when I started this podcast and I found out there were so many lawyers who were like taking big risks, but also the risks were into creative things. So yes. You are fitting all of that.
And I agree with you on that sentiment. And what I have found probably before I found myself or accepted the fact that I am creative first and I just happen to be all these other things, is that the attorneys that I knew were always creative. So my mentor has been an ERISA attorney, and I'm an ERISA attorney, but he was an ERISA attorney since it started in 1974. But he also was an English major, and he's a fabulous writer. He's a composer. He does digital artwork. And so I believe that is there because of the nature of how deeply we think and take in details. And we are trained to tell stories when we need to sway an audience, to argue something and argue our point. And I believe that those can contribute to really creating beautiful things, but healing ourselves in the process.
Yeah. That's a really good way to describe it. And I feel like since the pandemic, people have been making more of a separation of like, I do this, I'm a lawyer versus I am this. And that's been a really big shift for me where I'm like, yeah, I am a podcaster, creator, business owner in the body of a lawyer or in the career of a lawyer.
Yes.
Right. And I never had that distinction before. In fact, honestly, the title of the podcast, You Are a Lawyer, was like a mantra to me. You are a lawyer. You may not look like it. You may.
Like, come on, you're a lawyer. Yes.
Yeah. And it's funny because now it's kind of like, well, no, I work in law firms, but I am Kyla, right?
Exactly. I am me. I'm just me. And I have a toolbox of skill sets. And one of them is that as an attorney, as a lawyer, as an advocate. And I believe that's where health resides in being a lawyer and in the profession, is acknowledging all the parts that make us human and not just siloing ourselves as attorneys, lawyers.
Yeah. Okay, so we had to start off with that artwork because it's beautiful. I absolutely love it. And also, Olivia, would you tell the audience what you do every day? Like, what is your career and what is the role that you're currently in?
Happy to, and thank you for asking. So day to day, I joke about it. It's kind of in a Pandora's box of legal analysis challenges. So my full-time employment, because, we got to pay the bills, pay those law school loans.
Buy the paint.
Yeah, buy the paint. That's right. Fund my passion project till I don't have to, right? So I am a benefits compliance counsel for a national insurance services company, which on its face is kind of the antithesis of me as a creative individual and painting. So my day to day, however, is spent answering questions and educating about ERISA law for our nationwide agents and supporting their clients. And the beautiful thing about what I do, and I am grateful for this, and this is where I bring creativity into my role. I'm a licensed teacher as well, and I've taught for 20 years in different age groups, and I create education content. Sometimes I will go speak at conferences, and so I'm responsible for creating the visual items that help educate our adults about ERISA. So to the extent that the law permits it and regulations and compliance, that's my day job. I get to be creative in that sense. So that's the full-time job.
Yeah. So ERISA, what does that acronym stand for?
Employee Retirement Income Security Act. So that's a retirement account and benefit plan. So if you have health insurance through your employer, I am the attorney who will help those employers ensure that they are appropriately advocating for the rights of their employee participants. So most individuals get their health insurance through their employer. That's a big part of a benefit package. And so there are rules and guidelines to ensure that your employer is properly documenting and notifying you as a participant.
Yeah. So I think that's fascinating because compliance, I thought I would always love compliance, right? You tell me this is the rule and I make sure people are following it. Easy,
Yeah.
right? I'm an enforcer. But ERISA plans, that's insurance, that's medical plans, that kind of stuff changes almost every year.
Yes. It changes very often. It's so in one, it's the two sides of the same coin. So for me, it's nice to have the changes because for me personally, it keeps me engaged in an area that I would not naturally be drawn to as a creative individual because it can be incredibly stale at times, regulations. And so that's a good thing. I like the fact that it changes. How do we then reassess and look at a law? How's it going to affect how you do business? So that's good. On the other hand, it can be incredibly limiting and gray, which means I have to deal with things that we don't know. But there are also a lot of different areas that are affected by ERISA regulations and things to think about. So I think the fact that it's both variegated, if you will, in the different applications, but also there's still some guidance. It helps me as a creative person to be like, well, what are we going to do today? What is the government done now, and how are they going to affect Medicare? How are they going to affect Medicaid? How's it going to be? When do I have to notify? So it keeps me interested, but it can be taxing because of the pace of change. And when it does change, it's intense to edit everything. Very intense from a legal perspective and that task.
I just had a flashback. One of my first jobs was as a document specialist, and it was in the property section. And we used to have to
Yes.
read property descriptions out loud, like commas and everything. And for some reason, you saying you have to update everything specifically just made me think of that. That's funny.
And then you have that sort of like heart palpitation. You're like, oh God, okay.
Yeah, because we used to have to read it out loud to another person. They're like, "Yep, wait, you didn't say the comma. Go back. Is there a comma?"
Yeah, you point that out. Like a comma is something that that level of detail can get. It's good to be detail oriented. It can be something that you get caught in or siloed in if you're not doing something to balance that.
100%. In fact, my current theme is done is better than perfect because I was using perfection as a sort of procrastination. It's like, no, it's not
Yes.
ready. And it's like, Hyla, this is not going to the Supreme Court. Put it on the website and move on.
Yes, just is it good enough? Is it going to get it? Have I reduced the risk? Am I educating it? Can people find it? And this is the area that I work in, and there's business decisions that aren't mine. There's this kind of, and learning that kind of navigating that as a professional and growing in your career, and it's specifically for me as an Arista counsel is like I can't answer everybody's questions, and I'll stay here and I'll defer. That way, I can give you most of me whatever questions I get.
Correct. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So I love this. This is so exciting. So let's talk about your website since we're talking about
Yeah.
websites.
Oh yeah.
Live Balance. So
Yes.
funny because it's like a play on your name.
Yeah.
So which one do you want to talk about first? Do you want to talk about how the website is kind of like a visual resume of yours, or do you want to talk about your book?
Let's talk about the website first, because I think it's the precursor to how you actually see the book on the website. So live balanced. That name came out of a really creative and fun coaching session that I had with an individual about 5 years ago. I was finishing up law school and I was like, what am I going to do next? And I had completed my research in law school for my thesis, and it was on lawyer well being, and specifically on the fact that lawyers rated the loneliest of professionals, followed by doctors and other professions. And my background as a wellness educator, my licenses are in health and biology, so I'm science based there. I'm like, why are lawyers so lonely? And what is this? And no one wants to talk about it. So I decided to combine the two. I did research in law school, and then I'm getting ready to graduate from law school. And I'm like, I have all of these things I want to share. And I think it's really important to share creativity. And I decided to put that onto a visual resume, but also something where a website where you can go find information, but it's not just black and white, and it's not just lots of words. It's me, but color and my story, but also these, you can go and look at it as a lawyer, as a non-lawyer, and learn more, and takes you to links to my paintings, to the research and other projects that I have in the works. But it's just nice and easy to go there and be like, oh, what's this about? What's this website about creating and balancing, and what does that mean? And can you be a balanced attorney? So that's how that came about. And I remember pushing, because I do all of my own Squarespace. I use Squarespace, and I do all of my own creating. That's a creative endeavor for me. And I remember pressing the live button. I was like, okay, because it was vulnerable to be seen in that way, especially having just come off of law school. So that's the website.
Yes, and I have to say it's very colorful. I love
Yes.
it.
Yes.
I'm all about it.
Thank
So
you.
yes, being a lawyer and the practice of law can definitely be a really lonely experience. And I would even say that law school can be pretty lonely because you're surrounded by people, but you're all gunning to be the one, right? A lot of people either forget or don't know, but in law school, you all start with a zero, and the person who had the most points sets the curve. So you're literally all competing with each other to be like, who's gonna do it? Who's gonna do it? Who's gonna do it? So even that aspect of it is isolating because it's like, okay,
Yes.
yeah, I sit next to you, but I'm trying to beat you.
Yeah. Love you, but not sure if I really do. Can I really connect you? And you make an incredibly important point that my research showed. The further that we go through law school, and I did my research on loneliness and law students, and then it won an award. I was asked to republish it a year later, and I had a co-author, and we dived into it because it was during pandemic, and loneliness was becoming an issue, and it is now a big issue. And you make a good point that law schools, the training and my research showed that the environment of most law schools historically, now there's some really trying to change it, does not encourage community and connection, which is absolutely essential to managing lonely feelings. Because loneliness is, I don't believe that it's negative. I believe it's a dashboard light that says, hey, I need to go connect. I need to connect with myself. I need to connect with another human. What do I enjoy doing that's not related to work or performing? Like, because it is the discrepancy between what we have and our perception of it and then what we want. So we may have material things, but something is missing. So in that environment at law school, when you're competing and you know that you're always being measured against someone, it makes one feel incredibly lacking 24/7. While at the same time trying to make friends when you're going through this experience that is incredibly exhausting for your entire body systems, and you want to be trusting someone, and then you're trying to meet these expectations, it's a very good recipe for what I call eroding one's personality while increasing the incidence of anxiety, depression. We know lawyers have higher suicide, anxiety, and depression rates, substance misuse, and emotional unhealth. And that includes loneliness, which is one reason why I believe it's really high in lawyers in particular. Physically isolated, which does not help. And then we're emotionally and community isolated. So, yeah, that's what I learned in my research, and then going through it at the same time while I'm also over here like artist and teacher and well-being. And I was trying to balance my own. and seeing my colleagues struggle as well.
Yeah. So I have two things just like running through my head. The first one is, you said on your questionnaire, I always ask guys, would you go to law school again? And you said it depends, which is
Yeah.
such a lawyer answer.
Yes.
But given what we're talking about loneliness in law school, is that part of why it depends?
Yes, it is. And yes, the it depends is one of those things I lean into now because it's used as a negative thing about attorneys. But I value our profession and honor it. And a person who is in it and has gone through that and has to be an attorney every day understands why we say it depends. Because we're considering so many factors that could have literal life and death consequences. In the case of going back to law school, it depends because what I would say to someone who's considering it is it will require a part of you can't get back and you will change. I went back at the age 35, part time in the evening. So I'm working all day, going to class in the evening. It was exhausting and tiring, but I think the fact that I had a full time role and at work, and I had a husband at the time when I started law school, and I have lived life, helped me to like, whoa, let's put this in perspective. So if you want to go to law school and you love it and you have a heart for it, I say go for it. But make sure that you have good community and support and well-being practices and never let up on those because those are necessary to keep you to be the best lawyer, right? And so that's why I say it depends. If you're going because someone expects you to go or it's in the family and you hate it, I guarantee you're going to hate it through the whole thing and you're probably going to be unhappy and then quit in a few years and go do what you really love. That's what I have found.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the scary things about law school because a lot of times people are on that like conveyor belt to law school. I have to
Yes.
take the LSAT. I take it a couple of times and I get into school, but that's not the school I really wanted to go to. And you're just going and going and going.
Right.
And I feel like a lot of times we forget our why. And I
Oh,
think,
yeah.
especially when people get there and they're like 25, if they went straight from undergrad. I went to law school at 28. So I had
Okay.
time to have a career and a salary and all of this. And I was like, okay, I'm still thinking about law school. I'm going to go. And it didn't make it any easier, but I did know that there was stuff on the other side, right? I was like,
Yes.
okay, this is a 3-year pause, but like I can always go back to making money. I can always go back to having a job. I can always go back. However, that did not mean that I was able to get away from what you said, eroding your personality.
Yeah.
That is fascinating because I never practiced. I had an image in my mind of this big wig Kyla lawyer, and I wanted to be her, but I would not be sitting here with you now. I would
Right.
be partner already. 2025 makes 10 years since I've been out of law school. And so I would have already been partner. I mean, I'm talking no sleep, no kid. I would have been powering through and I would have
Mhm.
achieved it. And I can't even tell you who I would be. It almost is like scary to even think about because
Yeah.
that was what I wanted though. And so my life didn't go that way. And then I had to deal with this whole, well, that was who I was going to be. So who am I now? And that's literally where the podcast came from. And it was like, Kyla, you're a lawyer. A lawyer is someone who's graduated from law school or studied the law. And I'm like, I'm a lawyer. And I'm talking to my friends who are licensed, like, can I say that? And they're like, of course. I'm like,
Yes, you're a lawyer.
I'm a lawyer because I didn't know. I was Kyla the employee, and then I was Kyla the law student, and I was about to be Kyla the big wig. And so I was like, who am I now? And it was tough. And so I've never heard anyone say it that way, eroding your personality.
Mhm.
And I think that's a great description.
It is something that when I did the research at the law school, my research showed that as students went through, those who replied to my survey, as they went through school, they became lonelier. If they were longer than 3 years, the standard, right, then their scores were quite a bit higher. And my professional liability professor is the one who encouraged me to work on this research and was my mentor for this thesis, my thesis. And her research is cited in my journal article and publication, and also in my book about law school takes brilliant, high achieving individuals who have incredible talent and can often absolutely make them worse at person skills, at their own self-esteem and self-efficacy, because those are different things, and well-being, how well you think you can do, what you actually think you're worth. And it can take those skill sets that they naturally have and just the pressure to do something in a certain way and be black and white can erode that. And that to me is eroding one's personality. You come in, imagine a child who is carefree and you're suddenly requiring them to not have the expression and only wear black and brown and navy outfits. And if you're a woman, you have to do this and you have to, it's just exhausting and it erodes someone's personality in my opinion, based on the research I've done.
I am so excited to read this book. Okay. These are all great segues, but truly, this is a really good conversation.
Yeah,
So,
thank
Liv,
you.
you've written a book called Painting the Landscape of Loneliness.
Ta-da!
As you've heard, audience,
Yes.
and you also are a law school graduate and all the stuff, and you've done all the research. So, talk to us about the book. I know that was a different creative arm. That was a little bit different that you had to do. What
It
was
is
that process like?
exhausting in a different way than law school. It was having to pull out and acknowledge my personality and the deepest parts of me in order to heal. Now I can say that now almost a year after publication, but when we look like, so this is the cover of my book and I'm very proud because this is a close-up of one of my paintings and it's my favorite colors. And it wasn't the popular choice by I self-published, but I had a publisher in California. And everyone gives you their opinions on what you think you should do and how it should be titled. And I've learned from those experiences. But I realized that if I was going to put this out there and take my research, revise it, and then add my own personal story of how I dealt with and learned through loneliness, it needed to be me because it is me. These are my diary entries, my words, the research I did, the year of research. I mean, it took from inception of the paper was published in May of 2019, and my book is published in January of 2024. So in that time period, it grew, and I kept saying, no, I'm done with loneliness research. It's exhausting. It's tiring. I'm an empath. I'm a highly sensitive person. So it required a lot of me to go back and revisit memories to help people understand what loneliness could look like when we know research says it's one of the things people never want to talk about. It is like the stigma when it comes to emotional health because we feel lacking when we say we're lonely, like something's wrong with us. And that's not what I've experienced. And I want to be able to tell people that is not a bad thing. But it did require me to go back and start healing because I talk about growing up and challenges. I talk about athletic performance and expectations and stopping the creative to be an academic and make sure I got a college degree. And no one said I was doing anything wrong and I was Miss Perfect and and I was a model. And then I got married and it was unhealthy marriage. And having to learn who I was. And I tried to do that with words. And then it's one of the reasons I paint abstract because that is the closest to how I feel we can express, but universally understand artwork. So for me, it was a journey. It was coming back and revisiting difficult things, but in the process growing and being proud of the vulnerability and saying, yeah, that's what happened because that's what my diary said. And I won't give you the names, but you need to understand that you can be in a 15-year marriage and still feel alone. And it's not acceptable. It's not good for either person. So like those things I felt literally I had to do it. Like it kept coming back and kept coming back. And I was like, all right, we're just going to do this. So I'm proud of it. And it's out there for the world. It's in the Library of Congress. It's in paper. I recorded my own audiobook, which was a really special thing. So yeah. And it's something that lawyers don't want to talk about. Vulnerability, loneliness. No, especially those who feel they have a risk of being seen as less than if they admit to being a human.
Well, I mean, first of all, lawyers are not celebrated for being human. I was going to say we're not human, but that doesn't make sense.
No.
We're not celebrated for being human. And so therefore lawyers do not lean into, they don't tell people they're anxious. They don't tell people they're overwhelmed. You get that email from a partner, can you do X, Y, Z? Yep. Instead of, certainly, when would you like this done? Or probing for more. We don't do that. Yes, no, it's black and white. Just do it or don't. Mm-hmm. And so I want to hear a little bit about like the vulnerability of writing the book versus painting. Because I know I have a diary, and I mean, it's in my will, like, burn this before. You're like, so, but even just because, like, that's mine, those are literally my unfiltered thoughts that I put down on paper. What was the vulnerability like for you to say, if I put my story out there, it could change someone, but it's worth it? What was that like?
It was multiple instances of standing here at my computer in my desk and saying, okay, if I do this, I could, there are persons who are going to know who this is about, and it could end a relationship. People could say, I'm weak. People could say, they could say whatever they want to say. None of that was worth more than saying my truth, because I felt absolutely driven to saying, this is what happens. And because I did the research and I spent a year doing that research and I looked at everything and I thought, how much loss is there because people are afraid to say, I just want to talk to somebody and I feel lonely because life is not exactly what I thought it would be. How can I improve it, and what do I need to learn about myself? Like, but I had to multiple times just be like, okay, I could lose this, and I have lost a measure of relationships. But what I've learned in that process, because I am in active therapy now and have been for some time to heal and become the best me, is those relationships that I was concerned about were not healthy to begin with. And so I'm embracing who I am. I'm embracing the fact that I've always been an artist and I love sparkles and I love that little bit of edgy on the attorney. And that when we shut it out and act like it doesn't exist, we are literally saying we're not worth it. And you're saying it to yourself. It doesn't matter what anybody else says. So it was quite vulnerable. I was in a lot of tears in the evenings writing my book. You're like, oh my God, okay. Because I knew it would be there for people to read. Yeah.
Yeah, but it does. Any kind of risk that you take is going to be vulnerable because you're being
Yes.
the pioneer. You're being the first one to do it.
Yes.
And I want to mention to the audience, we just talked about how you love your job in compliance, and
Mm-hmm.
also you can be a vulnerable person,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
right? We are multifaceted, and I hope that's what
Yes.
everybody is hearing from this. This does not mean that Liv is leaving out of meetings at work crying in her office. This does not mean that she's a lonely employee. It means that she has multiple layers. Oh, I can do a great job when it's time for me to do my work. And I can also be an empath, and I can also be an author, and I can also be a painter, right? You literally get to create the world that you want. You get to create the life that you want.
Yeah.
So if you're working in that big law firm and you love it, stay. If you don't care for it, switch practice groups. You know what I mean? If you're a law student listening and you're like, oh, great, I am lonely. Liv's book includes strategies to identify your needs so that you can get out of that loneliness, or so you can pair up with someone else. Like, you're already listening to this, so find the help. It's here.
Yes. Exactly. Yes. From someone who's been there. And also, I have 19 nieces and nephews. I have 7 siblings. I grew up caring for others as a child, and so but I'm also naturally just someone who wants to nurture and say, "Hey, you got it. Go forth." I mean, that's a teacher in my experience and in my personal teaching philosophy. So I had classmates who were 22, 23, who were the same age or younger than my brothers, and I'm like, okay. So you always are a role model, whether you know it or not, no matter what you do, but the people around you are always looking at you. So it's to be able to say, look, my book is what I wrote because I lived this life. It's my vulnerable experiences, and it's research based. And I went to law school, and I'm still an attorney. I hope that helps anyone in this sphere say, just take a break. And my question is, are you happy in your daily life? And if not, let's focus first on yourself. What makes you happy? And make that list. And that's a good place to start. And I talk about that in my book.
Yeah. And I think that's really important. I had one other conversation with someone where we talked about being happy, and I asked her, I was like, are lawyers allowed to be happy? Because in the vision that I had of me as bigwig lawyer, I was not happy, although I was extremely successful. But
Yes.
I did not expect to be happy. And I think that's a different thing for us to say. you can be happy. You don't have to be whatever you saw or heard about lawyers if that's not what you want. And that was hard for me because I wasn't expecting it. So it's not like I was missing it. And
Right.
so, I hope people are listening and they're realizing that there's a lot to this.
There's a lot to this. And I'll leave you with what my therapist, who is an absolutely wonderful human, highly educated, and works with other professionals. And in the last year, she's like, Liv, suffering is optional. You are an intelligent, highly trained individual who has empathy and you can figure it out. You are worth living every day doing something you love. So start there. And you said there's so many people that change jobs, and research does show that the more you have material as an attorney, the worse your happiness and your health is. So it's about taking care of you first, and other things will fall into place. And that isn't always the chill ride. But I guarantee, I can tell you from my experience, it is totally worth it. So I appreciate being able to share my story and what I did and that work that I put in, because I believe in it deeply. And when you look at the media now, loneliness is a major topic, and I'm happy to see it finally getting the attention it deserves.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my goodness, I love this. So, Liv, I always ask every guest, what would you say to young lawyers, 5 years practicing or less, or law students about what they can do with their law degrees?
You can do anything with your law degree. I call it my Swiss Army knife. It is the training that you receive if you put it in the correct silo. And my mother would always say, honey, you got to slot it and put it in its correct spot. So if you think that law school is the only thing to make you happy and successful, that might be disappointing and very likely will be. But if you think of it as an opportunity to learn skills from people who have done this for a long time before you, you can apply those skills in every aspect of your life. And I do every single day in everything that I do. This is abstract, but my attention to detail, I put green where I want it. I see the world differently, and I'm grateful for that training. And so if it's not exactly what you expect, at least you have those skills. It's your Swiss Army knife. You can do a lot of things with it.
So, thank you so much for chatting with me today. I really appreciate it, and I hope you have a great rest of the day. Bye.
Bye.